Chiiz Photography magazine. Today we have Nithil Dennis. Nithil would be walking us through his journey through as a travel photographer. Recording of this event will be available. You can visit our YouTube channel and you would see the recording. In between, if you have any question, you can ask. Two ways to ask. One, you can put it on question and answer section on your device, or you can raise your hand and on your behalf, we will be asking the question. So thank you very much, Nithil, for being a part of the show and accepting our request to be on the show. Over to you. Over to you. All audience will be muted, and if any question, anything there, I will.
I need to just share my presentation now, but I'm not able to see where the sharing option is now. Okay. Yeah, I've got it. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So shall I start?
Yes, please.
Okay. Good evening, all of you. I'm so happy to be part of this particular event today, which has been organized by Chiiz, and I thank Chiiz for giving me this opportunity at the first place. But this is my first webinar, so I'm a little nervous, and I've also seen a lot of my own people, like people whom I know online, and I'm a little nervous about it. But nevertheless, I would like to thank all of you for coming online to listen to this lecture. And I will try my level best to make sure that it's fruitful and helpful for you in the future. So to basically give a small introduction, now I live in Bhutan, and it's freezing. It's 7 degrees, and I'm wearing 4 layers to protect myself, and along with that, I have my heater on in the room. So pardon me if I'm too animated with my hands, because now and then I have to just keep myself up.
So, are you sharing your screen?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please minimize the other screen so that we can see the PowerPoint?
Can you see that?
It must be coming up. Not yet, Nithil.
One second. I think there is a problem. Oh, okay. Now it should be there.
Yes, it is there. You can put it on presentation mode, and we are all good. Yeah. Please carry on.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm so sorry about these technical issues. As I told you, this is my first time in doing a webinar. But from March 5th onwards, we've been teaching online for our students, but more on the Google Meet. So there's a slight difference between that and this. Yeah, as I told you, I'm in Bhutan and it's freezing cold, but I think I'll do a good job. Apart from that, before I start, I just wanted to give you a small brief about the topic. It actually tells storytelling through photography, how to make better travel photographs. So here I will specifically be, very clear and give you a disclaimer that the first disclaimer is this is not for time pass travel photographers. What I mean by time pass is those people who just go, who just click beautiful pictures or like landscapes and wonderful colorful pictures, and then come back and claim themselves to be travel photographers, and just for the heck of getting likes on Facebook and social media. This is going to be a little serious, more than the amateur level. It's semi-amateur and professional level, I would call it, but not too much professional, because it is not a technical presentation again. It may not have too much of technicalities. It is more about how stories are told through visuals. So I'm also presuming that all of you have a little bit of knowledge about photography, at least small, I mean, little technical aspects like, basic exposure and aperture, uh, shutter speed and ISOs. And of course, beyond that, there is a lot of aesthetics that is involved, which will be part of the presentation. And the last point that I would say is you might it is about travel photography, but it can probably border between street documentary and travel photography because storytelling is a part of it. And I would majorly concentrate on storytelling because till date, whatever presentation I have seen on travel photography, people talk about beautiful images, people talk about technicalities, people talk about astrophotography, they talk about landscapes, ND filters, depth, perception, but at the end of the day, they miss out on the story. So I thought that I will take up story as my main, content, and then explain, the main aspects of storytelling through photography. Now, looking at the objectives and learning outcomes of this particular presentation, it will basically help you to, find a story, how to identify a story, and to be able to tell it in pictures. Now, that's pretty difficult because a lot of people are wordy. They can be like flowery with their words, but when it comes to pictures, they just crash. So this is all about pictures. This is all about images. So my PPT will only have images. There won't be any text. I mean, like barring a few. And also it will develop your understanding of how to give a sense of place to the location that you are in. And also it will make you understand the basic rules of composition and how probably even breaking those rules can still get you a fabulous shot, because most of the time people always, and photographers say this is a rule, this is a rule, and this is a rule, but there is also breaking the rule. I mean, know the rule and break the rule. So that will also be there. And I'm sorry about the spelling mistake here. Learn the creative use of light, composition, and perspective. Now, start as a clean state. I mean, like, with a clean, like you have a clean slate in your head and be zero. Just think that you don't know anything about travel photography. Be passionate, about what you do. So you need to really listen to me so that you can understand what I'm trying to tell. If you have just woken up, please wake up more and open up your minds, because there are so many things that's happening around the world now. People have their own timings gone haywire. So just open up your mind. And no offense, but this picture tells everything. At the end of this presentation, most probably you will be god of all things, or probably as lazy as that dog, not knowing anything at all. So basically, I've used a palindrome, which is god and dog right here in the visual itself, which itself is a story. So to start off with, my first story. So the whole presentation is done in such a way that I have created stories out of series of images. So they say that a picture tells 1,000 words. I mean, yeah, but then there are pictures which tell a lot of stories. There are also consecutive, I mean successive pictures that will tell the story as well in this particular presentation. I've given a little bit of technical knowledge about what camera I have used for this particular series, or that story. Story. So this story, which is called as Refugees in Their Own Land, is shot on Canon 600D, which is a crop frame camera, which was my first digital camera. I've used 50mm 1.8 and 55-250 and 1855, which is the basic kit that comes with that particular camera. So before I get into this whole series, I would like to tell the picture that you see on your screen is a place called Saho in Himachal Pradesh, and it's a fascinating place, a small little village, which is a model village, which is created on a floodplain by an old gentleman who's been fighting the government and the authorities. But interestingly, this particular village also has a tribe which is almost forgotten, in the books. They are called as Van Gujars, or the forest Gujars, not the Gujars who live in the plains, but are the ones who live in the hills. But while you actually are trying to tell a story through images, this particular image is called as the introductory image, or probably the establishing shot that we call it in photography, which is an extreme long shot which gives you the perspective of that location where this story is set up. So to talk about Van Gurjars, these Van Gurjars live in this town, and this is typically how their house looks like. So while you're traveling, I mean, this is something that I kind of came across while I was in this particular location in Himachal called Saho. I was holidaying there, and while I was walking one morning, I found that these people looked a little different from the normal people in the village. So I started questioning them, and that's another very important thing about photography. A photographer has to be very inquisitive. He has to be very curious about things. So when I asked, I kind of got this information that they are called Van Gujars. They basically spread between Pakistan and India in the bordering lands. But most of them now live in the Indian side of Indian side, and they are basically they follow Islam, and they come from the Pathani clan. But men are very tall, lanky, and women are a little short. And the unique thing about this particular tribe. So while you're actually doing while you're traveling, if you talk to people, try to get as much information as possible. That's part of the research. Now, while I was researching, I found these houses now are I mean, at that particular time they were all closed and there was not many people living there. And I understood that they are the men basically have gone to the highlands because it was summers, and they usually have a lot of livestock, and they have taken them to the highlands, and the women and children stay back. And most of the times the families go together, so that's why some of the houses were just empty. But then this is how typically it looks. So looking at architecture to establish the way of life of these people, this picture tells a fantastic story in itself. Now, a few of the men were remaining, and I just found one family where the entire family was there, and this is the family. Now, looking at it, I have used a technical concept of photography, of its perspective, and it's also called size constant, where the distant objects become smaller and the nearer objects are bigger. Now, here I have created, an hierarchy, probably I would call, but not exactly a hierarchy. The woman is almost very close to her home, which kind of says that she stays closer to the home. There is the son who is there in the middle, and the father who is very close, who is basically prominent in the image. So basically, composing is very important in travel photography. And the story that I would like to tell here is that when I actually also did my research, found out that it's a patriarchal society where men do dominate and are the head of the family. So obviously this picture has its own hierarchical placement of subjects, which kind of tells you that story of this particular tribe. Now when these men move out, the women are the only ones who stay at home. But again, this is just a suggestive picture of how that society could be probably divided, and how the genders are divided. There's this prominent male shoe on the right with the division in the middle, and then there are these female shoes on the left, which is just scattered. But here it is more organized, there it's more scattered. It kind of gave an idea of how they live. So while you actually do travel stories, it is very important to observe small things like this, so that your story becomes more unique. And another very important thing about observation is, while you come across such communities, while you're traveling, look at minute details of everything to do with their lives. Sometimes they will give you all the opportunities to photograph. Sometimes these people will be shy, So you need to have a lot of good people skills to get them and convince them to, take pictures. So it's important, but then don't intrude too much. That's again unethical in many ways. But then this is something which I found very interesting: a mud house with a small wooden, window-like structure there. But then that the edges have been decorated with, those colorful, patterns. Now that kind of gives an insight while you're taking pictures into the life of these people, of how artistic they are. Now, talking about art, excuse me, these people, I would say that while I was actually talking, there was this boy who started playing the flute. So I asked them about music. No, exploring. Exploring is very important. You can't just like that go, oh, wow, this is beautiful. I want to take a picture of this. Oh, that's wonderful. I want to take a picture of that. I found out that, this particular tribe, the women sing, but how do they sing? They don't usually show their faces. They sit exactly like how they are sitting. They were actually singing, and that is how I clicked the picture. There's a very important aspect about their culture. So while you're traveling, if you have to, really bring out the fact or, document real life, this is exactly how you do. Make them sit in their own environment and click those pictures and, tell your stories. Of course, without a little bit of explanation, this photograph would just look like two women sitting, looking at each other, or one looking away from the other. But then there's so much of importance, so much of, story in this particular photograph about the culture and the sense of art that this particular community has. Now, again, as I told you, another family of, with the male member of the family is out. So I kind of, try to take the picture inside the house, and being a crop frame camera, the ability to capture the light was a little not that good. So you can see the grains, but then I kind of got a painting image here. Which kind of gives you the Rembrandt shadows, which are very soft and gentle. So what I kind of applied all of these techniques which come to my mind. So I wanted it to look like a family portrait which is on a wall, a painting portrait which is on a wall. So that's exactly how I envisioned this particular image. So you see the kids and the women. So that again tells why the men are absent, because the men have gone to, to the highlands. They will be back only after 2 months, or probably even 4 months. It takes 2 months to reach the highlands. They stay there for 2 months. Then again, they come back after that. It's a long journey that they take, a very arduous journey that they take to go to the highlands during the summertime. Now, children, while you travel, are very interesting subjects to shoot. So in this particular story, when I was actually exploring their, their livelihood, their characters, the people, this little boy just came and was very curious about my camera. This was actually not shot, it's like a little lower than my eye level that I shot it. But he was a little curious about the camera, and I felt that interestingly, this boy came at the background, and then I just clicked it. So sometimes you have to look for those moments where there's an interesting moment that happens. And this boy in this picture, because it is a high angle shot, it's shot from a little high angle, it kind of suppresses his character, and it kind of gives you a very sad feeling, or probably, negative feeling. But contradictory to that, the same boy, I was basically following him, and he was taking me around, in fact. And at one point, I was a little lost with his parents, where I was talking to them. And then he just comes out, and I was actually standing right there, and he looks, and I just, shot that. So there's a difference in the perspective while you shoot. So be careful while you're shooting portraits, while you're traveling. And a high angle shot can suppress and give you a negative, outcome. Here it is positive. It's more of hope. It's more of, a very bold stand that the body language actually, shows. So these are very small little aspects of aesthetics which you will have to apply while you're doing your stories, while you're trying to tell stories through visuals. The last frame of this particular story is this, where this tribe, uh, they have been like traveling, taking this arduous journey for thousands of years now. But what has happened is, because of the partition, there's a lot of trouble, and most of the time they tend to cross over to the Pakistan side, or probably get into trouble with law enforcements. So there's so many issues, and also they have to take routes which are through the jungles, which have now been classified as wildlife sanctuaries and other areas. So there's a Michael Benelov has written a very beautiful book about this particular tribe, where he has taken a journey with them for 3 months. So if anybody is interested, that's a fantastic book of travel and social documentary combined book. It's called Himalaya Bound, if I'm not wrong, the title of that book. So for me, this picture shows a lot of hope, and they do have a future, but if only we support them, if only we understand their problems, if only we understand what these people, how important their lives are to us. So this is a kind of picture which kind of envisages that, and I have typically used the rule of thirds here to specifically separate the main subject, which is that one little man on a man on the left corner, and of course it's like he is leaving his home in this state, and he is hoping to come back with a treasure. Basically, that's what they do. They kind of feed their sheep and livestock in the highlands and come back with a lot of wool for the winters to be sold. So that's the end of this particular story. Now I'll move on to the next story, which is again very close to my heart, and the irony of resistance is what I have titled it. If you look at it, it's very interesting to see the trade union symbol, which is CITU, along with the cross, which is on the top, on the top in both places, and then the CITU font is written in the shape of a ship. So now, if I have to if I would have had an interactive class, I would have asked, what does it actually mean? But then I don't have that option now, so I would probably tell that you can easily understand that this particular image is something to do with a state which has communism, or a communist party very actively involved. So this is about Kerala, and how symbolically it kind of comes out is the prominent religion, or following of the people, which is Christianity, which is on top of the symbol, and also the port city of Ernakulam. So that is why the font is in the shape of a ship. Now these are hidden messages in a picture. Now how do you get this picture? That's the art of observing. That's the art of finding. And apart from that, while I was traveling to Kerala, of course, I'm very close to Kerala. I belong to the neighboring state. I know the history of Kerala. I know the political history of Kerala, and also the community. So I kind of wanted to explore Kerala in a very different way. So the irony of Kerala as a communist state, which with very less industrial development, is that long back in 1760, which this particular picture clearly states, there was a particular community who came to Kerala, like most of the foreigners who came through the through the western coast. It was the Jewish community who established commerce and trade here. So there's an irony. I mean, if you look, most of the communist states, it's more of workers and their trade unions. And there's a lot of commerce which is not allowed to happen. Industrial development is stunted in all of these states. But if you look at the commerce and the businesses that have happened through the western coast of India, it's very surprising and very ironical. In those days, this was pretty long back. So this picture tells you the period that that I'm going to talk about, and the community, which is the Jewish community in Fort Kochi in Kerala. So when you're actually doing a photo series, you should make sure that you have images which kind of, relate to what you're trying to tell. Now here there are two things. There's Jew Town Road, and then it says Jew Cemetery. Now, of course, there's again an irony there. I mean, there's a road and then there is symmetry. I mean, are you heading towards the symmetry, or are you heading towards something more interesting? So, as I told you, trade and commerce happened, through the port city of Ernakulam. But how do you symbolically explain, or how do you show it in a visual image? Now, when I was actually walking through the streets of Jewish town, I found out these two tiles on a wall, which had the, signs and signages of, olden times trading through the sea route. So that very almost like, I've kept half the frame on the image of the wall, and the remaining half is an out of focused street. I didn't want this to be very prominent, basically, because it will take away the importance of these two signages which is there. Now, these two tiles are from those era, and it is still being preserved, and it's there. Now, why? I mean, again, as I told, while you're traveling, it's not about just shooting the obvious, but trying to find out unique elements, unique objects, unique signs, unique symbols, which can explain the whole context of that particular location and that particular story that you're trying to tell. And again, historically, after all these invasions, Kerala has Portuguese, they don't have much of French, but Jewish. They have the English, the British, and so many other invasions have happened. They have still maintained some traditions of theirs, which is very original and very, very old. Like in this case, the coloring. So again, if you do not know what coloring means, in coloring, if you see the art form, so it's about research. If you do not know about coloring, you should read about it. If you know that tomorrow you're going to a gallery center to photograph while you're traveling, you should have studied the entire art. I mean, in terms of understanding it, not studying the entire art. I mean, like learning it, but at least in words you should know it. Calligraphy is an art form where the master is given utmost importance and he's respected. So my first instance to shoot was to take that particular image. But then again, this is a very unique angle. I mean, usually if you have to shoot somebody touching somebody else's feet, it will be both the person's image, and it could have been shot from a different angle where you can actually see the person bending down. Here I have left a little bit of mystery. So sometimes your photographs should have some kind of mystery to it. Now, who is this guy? Okay, yes, he's a student and there is a master who is blessing him. Understood, but who is he? Right? So that is where the visual has to be a little intriguing and not the obvious. So I always like to take such pictures while I'm traveling to give a different view to the viewers who are actually watching my images. And over the years, Kerala has been fighting this whole irony of commerce, tourism, and people and culture and tradition. So this image could probably stand out as a symbolic representation of their internal fighting that they have amongst their own ideologies, political ideologies. So here again, if you look at it, I have not exposed the second person. You can only see bits and pieces of him. One is a little bit of his shoulder, which is here, and then his hand, and then his leg. So there's again mystery in this image. And of course, a photograph without action is sometimes boring. Static images sometimes make very boring images, especially in when you're actually capturing an art form like gallery, where there's a lot of energy, lot of energy involved. So you should be able to bring out that energy in the image. If you're not able to, then it's very difficult. But I should also say that this was a very difficult image to shoot because I had a 50mm lens, and it was very low light, and I was using a very, very low shallow depth of field. So it requires and I was shooting with manual focus, so it requires a certain amount of precision to get the focus right. And if you look at it, the flare at the back kind of adds value to it, because somebody is just recording the whole sequence on their mobile phone with a flashlight. So such instances make the image more interesting. Now, again, as I told you, understanding tradition and culture is very, very important. And in this particular image, if I have to tell, I mean, as I told you, Kerala also has sustained their culture. Kathakali is an art form where even today, 99% of the performers are male. So if you do not know that, this photograph would not come out. Here, I have showed two, characters. Of course, the third character is not so important. So here I show two characters. One is a character who is right in the foreground, and then there is this character who is slightly out of focus, who is in the middle. Now, why this particular image, and why is he shirtless, and why is he got makeup on his face, is basically to kind of bring out the importance of the art form, or the characteristic of the art form, basically. It's only male characters, male dancers who actually portray both male and female. Now here you look, this character is shirtless, so you know he's male, but he has a female makeup. You can see the sharp, lines coming here. And this, you don't know, but it's a male character himself, because you see those, darker, thicker, lines going through here. So this kind of distinctly gives you that idea of what this art form is all about. So while I was also shooting this particular art form, I kind of took some unique images like this, which usually is not found, but it might look like a floodlight, like in an auditorium, but to be very precise, it is not. It is this. Now, how do you capture such moments? There's something called as waiting, being patient. I was with a group of students, and while we were actually photographing, there was this faculty who was wanting to take this image on a medium format. So everybody was curious to know what is this medium format camera was all about. But then there were bright lights. I wasn't getting the shot. I wasn't getting the story. I didn't have drama in my picture. So again, while you do travel photography, you should create a certain amount of drama. And that drama comes with, waiting. You have to be a little more patient. You have to just kind of have some intuition that something will happen. In this particular case, the electricity just went off. And of course, I mean, nowadays we all have mobile phones. Everybody just started, switching on their flashlights. And, there came the moment of drama for me. And the picture is right there in front of you. So look for moments, or wait for moments. If it doesn't come, it's okay. Just click the picture and come back. But if you get that moment, it's well and good. So there's a lot of things that you will have to understand on that. Despite Kerala being, traditionally connected and, rooted, there's a lot of tourism that happens. And I still remember 1994, I visited Munnar, which is a very popular hill station. It was pristine, beautiful. Again, I visited it in 2008. It was completely destroyed. And yes, this is a picture which could probably talk about how Kathakali, which is the traditional art form of Kerala, and which Kerala is known for, has now become a place of just massages. Whether it is authentic Ayurvedic or not authentic Ayurvedic, nobody knows, but everything is Ayurvedic there. So it's become commercial. Now, the commercial elements that have taken over this state is hanging right here. People find anything and everything to, sell. I mean, they can just hang anything and everything on anything and then sell it. So that much of commerce has taken over. And that's why I call that as the irony of resistance, and the alarm bells started ringing for Kerala when, too much of commerce, too much of tourism did happen. So this is a symbolic picture. Again, this was taken in the same street, the Jewish street, but I kind of, attached it to my story. That's why I said there are certain pictures which independently tell a story, and there are certain pictures which go with the successive pictures that are there. When the alarm bells rang, the time stood still. So anybody who would see this picture would tell me that this is an old post box, and the story in this particular photograph is this particular slot. And if many of us would be familiar with this, we know that in the morning at around 11:30 there is a clearance, and in the evening there is 4:30 clearance. And if you miss that particular clearance, then you have to your post will be taken only the next day. So here the time is not there. So that's how symbolically I wanted to put it across here, saying that everything stopped. It's frozen. So you can see such kind of things while you travel, but thinking beyond what you see is what photography is all about. Travel photography, storytelling is all about, and then creating a story out of it. Now today, after all that, commerce, capitalism taken over. You can see the image there. You have Pepsi, Cola, and mineral water. Water is in abundance in Kerala. You see everywhere it's water, water, water. They say water, water everywhere, but not a single drop to drink. Similarly, it's like all bottled up now. They are being framed and, kind of in a situation where people have resorted to such things where you're not supposed to do this. I mean, it says no parking, but you have parked your bike there. So the society has changed from being deeply rooted in tradition to what it is today. So this is again shot there. You can see the Malayalam text right here, which gives you a feeling of Kerala. So my story about Kerala is my personal experience of what I saw Kerala in my childhood, and what I have learned and studied and understood and read through my images. It involves a lot of background study and research to come out with images which can explain what I feel about a particular location. So with that, I'll end that particular story and move on to my experiences in Argentina in the year 2014. Now I made a small collage of these images which I had shot, which is very touristy because I was a tourist in 2014. I was there. But I also did a lot of research before I went to Argentina. Now, you might ask me why I went to Argentina. There were two main reasons. One is, of course, I had a good friend who helped me to, explore the place. And the second one was my love for, the country in terms of football. But beyond that, I did not realize much I didn't realize that I had more things connected with Argentina, but I learned it only after I went there. So the one thing that I would like to talk about is this famous song, Don't Cry For Me, Argentina, from this movie called Evita, which is sung by Madonna, and she has acted in the film. It's a musical. So I titled this story as Don't Cry For Me, Argentina. To kind of give you an overview of these images, this is where exactly Evita used to live with Juan Perón, who were the most famous couple of Argentina, the political couple of Argentina. So there's a lot of political history, and these signs which you see here are the scarves of the mothers who actually stood in this particular square in search of their sons and husbands who were killed during the military coup in the 70s. And there's a lot of rich, they have this habit of collecting antiques. And of course, most of you will know what this is. It's tango. They have these beautiful old little, junky cars, on the roads. You have Che Guevara, who belongs to Argentina, born there, and then later on shifted to Cuba, the legendary, revolutionary leader. This is something to do with how the streets are, and these people are there always. This is the countryside. The food, of course, all the banned food in India is available there in abundance. And then you have Maradona and his La Boca. This is shot in La Boca, where Maradona had his first played for the first club. And then, of course, the flag and the environment there. So before I go there, I would like to tell, these are common touristy pictures you see. You visit all these places. Casa Rosada, which is the castle, which is the Rose Castle, which is where the president sits and works. Of course, these tango dancers are all over the place. But how do you make your travel story unique? How do you make your audience to sit and read your travel story? That's when you need to go beyond your own normal traveling routine and go beyond the obvious. Here, with the help of my local friend, who actually I kept on pestering her to give me something new, tell me something more, tell me something more. And one day she said, I think you'll be interested to go to this place, which is called the Mansion of the Workers. And this is about this small little street called the Street of New York, very, again, unique, which is in a place 60 to 70 kilometers from Argentina. And it's called La Plata, and this particular location is called Berisso. Now, this is so important because in the 1930s, this particular place of Argentina was very cosmopolitan, with almost 15,000 people living in like just six blocks, because there were two refrigerators meaning cold storage, meat storage factories right here, and there was a lot of trade happening. And in one single time there used to be at least people from 15 odd 120 countries in that particular street. They had everything. And these mansions are houses where the factory workers, of almost like 15,000 of them, used to live. They also had something called as hotbeds. Now, all of this is before I went. All these things have already been told to me. This is how it is. This is how the town developed. But then these hotbeds are beds where these people come. They work in shifts. So one comes, sleeps, and one wakes up. So it's in rotation. So that's why it's called hotbeds. Now, this is all there in my mind. I've already understood it, but how did I capture this town and its present state matters a lot. So to introduce to you, this is how the town or that particular small village looks like. Now, if you look at it, it's so simple, but it has another very important historical connection called as the starting point of Peronismo. Peronismo is a movement. It's a communist social labor movement of Argentina. In the month of October in 1945, Peron was arrested after his first tenure by a military regime, if I'm not wrong. But there was so much of protest against his arrest, because Peron is known to be the labor leader of Argentina, political labor leader of Argentina. 20,000 workers from this factory on foot and horseback walked 70 to 80 kilometers to the capital to, protest against his arrest. And that is marked as the starting of Peronismo, the social labor movement in Argentina. But what has happened to that particular, town? Now here, so when I have the story in my head, while I go to this location, I look for elements. So here there is this plaque, which is a stone plaque, which says Berisso Kilometer Zero. This is where it starts. And then Peronismo. And they have, clearly told which year it was, this particular plaque was set up. But in a year's time, in 2015, this entire town was also made a national heritage center in Argentina because of the historical importance. But what you see, and this is Peron and Evita for your understanding, Argentina is known for its murals, and the history is right there in this small little town. This is the condition. Now you might think, what has happened to this town? Why is it like this? These are old number plates. The windows, they're all broken. The doors closed with no window panes. cars lying in a junkyard there, houses empty, which is like, spooky alleys inside. Now, what happened? That's this town with so much of history has been completely evacuated, or probably the people just left one day. That's what they say when we ask those people. They say that they just left. Why? Because in the 80s and late 80s, again Argentina fell in for an economic recession. These two factories closed down. People didn't have job, and they just left. But the beauty of this particular place is that they just left without taking anything. And it's still a mystery. So this is the story that I wanted to tell. That's why if you look at all the images, it's desolate, it's locked, there's no life. But there was a twist. I walked a little further with nobody there. I also found this pretty interesting. And I don't know how this came up, but there was this lonely shop. It's just the shop right there. So while you do such imagery, you can also understand that there should be a contrast. I mean, if you find a contrast, that's the best way to tell a story. And then the people. Finally, I saw a few people and finally understood there are only 4 families living there now. And interestingly, this picture is about also how flat compositions can be made. Many of times photographers tell that you need perception, you need depth perception, you need to have some kind of depth in your picture, either shallow, sharp, or all those technical jargons they use. But here, if I ask you what is the depth of field in this particular picture, you will be like blank. There is absolutely no depth in this picture. It's a flat image. And surprisingly, the 2 characters in the photograph. So this girl with my tuta puta of Spanish, I tried to convince her to post for my picture, but when I clicked, she just closed her face. But when I looked at my preview, I realized that there was a dog, which I never saw while I clicked, looking into the camera. Now, probably for me, this was a decisive moment, and Henry Carter-Bresson, the street photographer, talked about what is a decisive moment. It just happens. But for me, it happened in fluke. But I would call this as the photograph, which is my decisive moment photograph, wherein I wanted the girl to look. She put her head down. But the dog, which I don't know where it came from, just looks into the frame, straight into the lens. So at the end of the walk, I finally found out some humans still living there. But it's a wonderful piece of history. It's a wonderful piece of story which you can actually look for. As I told you, not the obvious places, not the usual touristy places. Look beyond it. Find such interesting stories, and your blog will be pretty interesting. Now, to go on, you don't have to always be very serious about your photography in terms of telling stories. It can be just candid, as I'd say, art of observation. For me, Argentina was new. It's a new country. So everything that I see was just getting into my head. I used to go to this park without my camera. So this is something which you can do as a travel photographer. Sometimes you just need to keep your camera aside, just observe. After 3 or 4 days, I found out that this park had very interesting characters. They're a pretty big park, but there are very interesting characters which you usually don't see in India. So for me, that was like, oh my God, no. But then how do you bring out these characters? They are in their own environment, but how do you differentiate between one character and another character? Look at these series of images which I had captured, which gives you a different feel in every picture. Sometimes and it's very candid, so nobody knew that they have been photographed. So it was all shot with a 250 mm lens, where I'm almost hidden. And there's this contrast between a couple sitting there and a single. And then there's this man who is actually mowing the lawn. And That's how you create characters in your picture, portraits with environment, establishing what they're doing, kind of contextualizing the whole picture. And then of course another person reading a book from a different angle. And I've used very shallow depth here to kind of give you a bokeh, a very different bokeh, not the usual bokehs that you find in pictures. And another one, so you have different angles, people with different poses doing different things. And finally, I don't know what this couple was doing. So uh, to sum it up, it doesn't always have to be about a place or history, or it can be just your basic observation of the location or the place where you travel to. And unfortunately, I was while I was there was this time of spring, and then during spring in Argentina, there's a lot of carnivals that happen. So it's a constant season of carnival. That's why I've titled as a constant carnival. So I was fortunate to photograph the carnival of these neighboring states. So most of the neighboring countries, most of the carnivals are about either Brazil, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Chile, Cuba, and Mexico, and all of that. So this is a festival of Bolivia. Now, I would say that this was one of the most toughest of my assignments, or my travel photography work, because within a span of like an hour, I clicked around 2,500 photographs. Why? Because I got lost. It was so colorful, so vibrant, and this is something all photographers should also consider. Don't overshoot, but then at times like this, it happens that you will end up shooting. Now here, if you look at the composition, it's single point perspective. It kind of the lines converge from the right and the left to the main point of focus, the guy who is actually holding this trumpet. Going forward, I also use the same principle of single point perspective with the converging lines, because this obelisk, it is called, is the main point of the town in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. It's the capital city, and this is where it is. So kind of gives you the context where it is being shot also. You know the city where it is being shot. So these are just dancers, and I took advantage of these these lines on the road, which are the zebra crossing lines, to give me the perspective of the single point. And yes, now while you do such image, you should also try to contextualize it in terms of what it is all about. Here you have two flags. One is the Argentine flag, the other is the Bolivian flag, and you see the entire street. So here, again, it's linear perspective with the converging lines to the obelisk, and it kind of gives you the context of where it is being shot, and the whole street covered with these dancers. So you get to feel the carnival right away while you are actually watching these images. And then also go a little closer. So it's not always, again, shooting wide angles and getting the the wider perspective. Try to go a little closer, use some interesting foregrounds, and and action. So the carnival was full of action. So if you look at it, this again is an action picture. Here I went a little low to kind of dramatize this whole guy who had this whole I don't know, headgear which had so many designs on it. And of course the main character here is Evita, who is Eva Perón, who is Perón's second wife, who is a very famous character in the political history of Argentina. And he has combined that with the Bolivian artifacts. So it was pretty interesting for me to shoot. But then I needed a different angle. Not always shooting eye level will work out. So I almost was lying on the ground to take this picture. So sometimes you have to go out of your way to take your angles, to explore and be wacky and crazy. And while you're doing this, so I mean, sometimes it's not, I mean, when you're shooting, it's colorful. There are a lot of people, they're singing, they're dancing, they're there, but look for some interesting elements. Here, in this case, this man carrying that boy just enters the frame while I was shooting. So this became an interesting picture. and of course sometimes they pose, and also these kind of colorful pictures. Now again, I told you something interesting can happen while you're shooting. Look for it. Here there is a feet with no head. There's a feet with no head. These are not normal. The dancers, they are the people who are watching, who are just crossing and crisscrossing. So by adding these elements in your frame, you can kind of go for a different look and feel for your picture, and then sometimes a story can be told as well. And yeah, the action. So the obvious thing is to shoot the action. And colors. While you're in a carnival, look for colors, interesting colors. Use colors in the foreground. That's very, very important. Or the background. Either ways, it's okay. And this is a very interesting picture, because for me it looked like the position in which he has actually kept that particular horn or instrument is very awkward. But it was interesting because of the fall of light. So while you're shooting, I mean, this was almost evening, so the sun had actually gone to us, an angle where it's creating a beautiful golden light on the subjects. But this guy, amongst all the crowd that is around, is completely oblivious of what's happening around him. He has kept that in a very awkward position, and he was just having his food because he was hungry. So moods, capturing moods while you travel is very, very important. Moods and this very funny moments that you can capture like this. So while I was again walking, I found this like plump, nice, his face had a very nice character. He was walking, I was watching and watching and watching, and suddenly I realized that there was this banner on top, and how is he gonna, do that? So I took my camera and waited for him to come to that point, and as expected, sometimes you have to expect, you have to anticipate. He got stuck, and then these two images are the best in that series, where there's one person looking on top, then the others trying to help him out, but look at his expression. So this is called expressions and moods. While you travel, it creates very funny and humorous tones to your image. And the light. Look at light, where it is falling, how it is falling, and enhance them. Take advantage of that. So here, as I told you, it was nearing evening, and the light was slanted. The golden hour was there, and these colorful, headgears and their costumes were, But again, a certain amount of mystery in the image, where the person is looking away from the, from the camera. And it's only their costume and the headgear that's very obvious. And yes, a carnival doesn't end without having good food. And these are empanadas, which had meat fillings inside. It's one of the most tastiest things. It's like our samosas in India. And again, as I told you, I've used backlight, rim lighting, basically. In this previous picture, again, it's rim lighting. Here again, rim lighting, to define the shape and the texture of that particular empanada. In normal terms, it looks like a samosa, but to make it interesting, you could use rim lighting to enhance the image. Again, the same thing I have used. It's the lighting that's falling on the food and the smoke coming out. So all of these are called as characteristics in an image, elements that you have to use to make your picture more interesting. Now, moving on to the next, and before I take a break for questions, I will finish with this. This is a very interesting aspect. Again, to emphasize on the fact it's not the obvious. So whenever I travel, I always try to connect or relate to India. So while I was traveling, while I was in Argentina, I did also basic research during my free time, and surprisingly found out that wonderful, great gentlemen of India in the early 1900s fell in love with a beautiful woman in Argentina. Now, who is this man? And this is the establishing picture, because I wanted to tell an ancient story, and this is an ancient vintage truck which is there. So this love story of this man and this woman of the early 1900s was immortalized into a film in recent times with an Argentinian film called Thinking of Him, which were the last words sent by that lady when this gentleman died in India. And she sent a telegram just with these words called Thinking of Him. The gentleman is Rabindranath Tagore. He was 63 years old at that time. And the lady is Ocampo. And she was just 32 years old, if I'm not wrong. Now, this story is pretty interesting that she fell in love with India as a whole because she was in love with Rabindranath Tagore. It was a very mild affair, a platonic relationship. They had wonderful times together, intellectual sharings that they had. But how did all this happen? While she was going through a divorce in the early 1900s, she read the Gitanjali, which was translated into French. She fell in love with Tagore and started, communicating on letters. But when Tagore was in Buenos Aires in 1924, he fell sick. And she took that as an advantage and, took him to her home, to her house, and they spent 2.5 months together, almost 2.5 months together. And he came back to India, but they still continued the conversations. And they say that Tagore, had dedicated a lot of poems, and he called her Vijaya, not Ocampo, but Vijaya, and she called him Guruji. So there's a beautiful story there, but how do you tell it? So I found out that Ocampo's house where Tagore stayed is converted into an UNESCO center. Now, this is a tourist attraction, but away from the city, not the normal tourist attraction. This is the bungalow where he stayed, and this is very rich, and she belongs to the upper class, uber rich class of people of those times, and the elements inside. So she's fond of things with class. So it's if I'm not wrong, it's Devon. I forgot the name of the piano. So she loves music. She got famous musicians to her home, and she also wrote a book, a bi-weekly magazine she published called Sur. Sur means south, and this is the magazine. So to kind of give the story of Ocampo, we need to connect all of this. So I've done my research and I looked for specific elements to shoot. And these are the famous people who had visited her. And this is the room where she entertains all her guests. And she also has photographs of each one of them, which includes Jawaharlal Nehru as well. And that's Ocampo. And she was also a great fan of the Nehrus. And she had collected the book about the Nehrus, translated into Spanish. And because of her connection with the Nehru family, when in the 1970s, late 70s or 80s, early 80s, when Indira Gandhi visited Argentina, she made it a point to visit Ocampo in the same house. And these are the images that are kept in that house. Now, this is very, very interesting for me because while I travel, I look for the connections way back, connecting India and that country. Here we see India connected with Argentina. Argentina is so far away. It's another continent on the other side of the globe. But there was a love affair. There was a relationship, in the early 1900s. How did this happen? It's intriguing. So these small little stories can become very beautiful blog entries for anybody who is into travel photography. This is a study room, the kind of books that she has, and the typewriter on the table. These are very interesting things, and those ink blotting machines, those things that are kept there. All of these are old. And also, this is the portico from where most of the time both of them spent their evenings and mornings together and, talking to each other on various aspects of art, culture, literature, and all of that. So with this, I will close my first part of the presentation and go on to the second part after taking a few questions from people. How do I go about it?
Thank you, Nithil. I'll read out some questions. If you want to take directly, please go ahead. If you, there are questions on the left,
Yeah.
so you can pick certain questions, and if you want me to read out after curating, we can do that.
I think a lot of questions are irrelevant here because they are asking about fashion
Right.
photography. This has nothing to do with fashion photography.
So let me do one thing. Let me read out certain questions for you. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we like one of the questions we have about the Himachal story. What's the
Yeah.
name of the place? Uh,
Saho. It's called Saho. It's in Chamba. It's in Chamba district, and the place is called Saho.
Saho.
Yeah, Saho.
Okay, okay. And by the way, it's amazing stories, amazing photos, and very well said. Most of us, when we go, we look for beautiful pictures with the scenic view and a good landscape and people. But I guess we the way you have done capturing all those images and creating a story, that's really amazing stories which you have created. And and sorry, a lot of people were not able to join because it was full. So the question which I have, which are relevant also here, we have a question from Manish, that what have been your career path, like how you started until now?
Okay. My career started, I mean, I was intrigued by the camera my uncle had while I was in seventh class, but um, I took up photography seriously when I started doing my diploma in printing technology, where I met a lot of other photographers in a forum where they used to come to watch films, and then we used to have a lot of discussions. And then later on, I took up the undergraduate course in visual communication, where I specialized in photography, and did a postgraduate master's program in filmmaking. So I shifted to filmmaking and then came back to teaching. So while I was teaching, I specialized again in photography. So I taught photography. But then parallelly, I was doing a lot of photography. Um, this inquisitive mind of mine kept, telling me that you have to go out, shoot. So I kept shooting and shooting and shooting and collected a lot of content for my classroom most of the time. So I've never done anything professionally in terms of photography. I haven't earned a single penny out of photography. Just that I teach photography and I earn out of it. But I haven't sold any picture, neither earned any money out of it. It is just out of passion that I traveled, because the kind of photography I do is street documentary and travel. So I have to travel. So it took me to countries like Turkey, Argentina, Dubai, and now I'm in Bhutan. But all through my career, I have done photography, and even now I'm teaching photography. So almost it's 20 years that I'm teaching photography.
Okay. Next question we have from Saurav Chaudhary. Please go
Mhm.
ahead and ask. It's a voice. You
Yeah,
are
can you hear
unmuted.
me? Can you hear me, Nithil?
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, hi Nithil. First of all, and thank you for sharing such beautiful stories. And I really like the Himachal, likely, which I'm I'm also trying to make such stories. So eventually, like I'm also in a learning phase right now. So I just wanted to ask, which is the best editing tools you are using for travel and landscape? Specifically, if I talk about, like I've seen many photographers use kind of a vibrant color to the skies, and they used to have such kind of a frame. If I talk about the subject as well as the background of a sky, they are
Mm,
quite
mm,
vibrant in color. So I was like
mm,
using somewhat, if I name some of them, like Lightroom and Snapseeds, but eventually they are all likely have a very limited editing kind of stuffs in that. So, which is the best which you can suggest to edit such kind of things in respectively?
See, there are two things. One is photo editing, and another is color correction. Photo editing, if you're talking about photo editing, it is called photo manipulation. That is basically, I call it as cut and paste or cutouts, which is done in Photoshop. But if you're looking for just converting your raw images to a JPEG and processing your raw images, Lightroom is the best software. Whatever you see in my pictures, I have only processed those images in terms of converting a raw image into a JPEG and using a little bit of contrast correction, a little bit of color correction, color tonality correction, and of course enhancing the sky a little bit. That's not manipulation. The data which is already available in your raw image is being exposed by processing. So I don't believe too much in editing. I believe in processing so that you kind of get the colors that you desired while you were shooting. Now, how do you get that? Is shoot neutral, completely neutral, and then take it to your software, and shoot neutral and shoot in RAW, take it to Lightroom and enhance the colors which you want to be prominent in your picture, or increase the contrast a little bit, probably the exposure, or a little bit of highlight correction and shadow correction can be done. So for all of this, I prefer Lightroom. So there's a difference between editing and manipulating and color correction, or it's called normalizing. They call it as normalizing. Technically, photographers call it normalizing.
Okay, thank you. We have another question, Ashwin Ravi Kumar. Please ask your question.
Sir,
Yeah, tell me.
sir, actually, hello.
I can't hear you.
I'm not unable to hear you, sir. Little bit of echoes are there.
Yeah, but can you tell me your question? Can you ask the question, please?
Seems like he has a bad connectivity. So we have Devjit Day. He has another question.
Yeah. Hi, Nithil.
Hi.
Yeah, my question is, how do you manage your lenses? Because the main inspiration for all the beginner photographer is you shoot with very basic camera, and how do you manage your lenses? Means you have only one device, right? So when you take close shots and when you take wide angle shots, how do you manage in that span of time?
So see, most of the photographs that I've shown till now are shot with a 50 mm 1.8 lens and a kit lens, which is the 1855, which comes with Canon 600D, and a telephoto lens, which is 55-50. So I carry it in my bag, and whenever I want to change my perspective, I change the lenses.
So he wanted to see, he wanted to check that how do you manage it? Like you keep the lens ready and change it, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's in my bag, but yes, I mean, if you have to have an all-in-all lens, there are some lenses which are usually used by photographers with it's cumbersome to keep changing lenses, but there are lenses like nowadays which come it's like 18-200 and 18-210 if I'm not wrong. Some lenses are there which you can shoot wide angle and at the same time shoot tele. So you don't have to change the lens. You just have one lens, but they are very costly, by the way, because they are super tele lenses, not super zooms. They're called as super zooms, so it's costly. Yeah. Otherwise, go with 3 different lenses. You have to be a little smart in changing it. You need to be. It's just a matter of practice.
We have another question. Like, have you shifted to Bhutan?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I teach in Royal Thimphu College now.
Okay. Oh, great. Congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And Nithil, another question we have, since you are associated with schools, it's a very good question. What are the things we need to look into as a student before taking an admission for any college, any photography courses?
From the students' perspective?
Yes. Like, what are the points to consider before deciding a college?
Okay. Deciding a college. That's a difficult question. Now I'll be very... Deciding a college, most of the photography schools in India, the schools which are dedicated to photography are good. But the problem I always have with the colleges is their curriculum, because they directly get into the highest level of photography. They don't concentrate on the foundations. They don't want to teach the foundations. One, because the students who come there always come with this glamorous idea of photography, and when you start teaching them the basics and foundations, they think, I know this, I've seen it on YouTube, so why are you even teaching me? So most of the colleges have, like, they don't concentrate on the foundation. So choose a college where they teach you the foundations. Photography cannot be taught. You just need to learn the foundations. You have to have a solid foundation to advance yourself to any genre, or diversify to any genre. But if your foundations are weak, you will not be. I mean, start off with like a 5D SR or a 5 Mark IV with the most advanced lenses, but you don't know anything about the camera, but just to press the button. And that's what most of the schools do. They just say, okay, fine, you have the best camera, you can take the best pictures. I'm sorry, I completely disagree with that. Choose a school who says, no, I will give you only this camera. You bring out the best out of it. That will be the right choice.
Okay, we have a question from Bhaskar. The Kalari pictures from Kerala, very interesting. Would like to know, would you like to know if you compose a picture and then you crop it, or you do, what's your composing technique while shooting?
Most of the time, I don't crop it, but at times sometimes it requires cropping. So most of the time, I try to compose it while I shoot itself, because I have maximum data while you're shooting on digital, especially. And then what happens while you crop? You lose data, and then your image becomes grainy, or it loses its quality. So I try my level best to get the image without cropping, but if it is required, and if I feel that there's a lot of too much disturbing elements on the sides, or on the edges, then I crop it.
Okay, thank you. What is your kit looks like? Like, what all gears you have now?
I just have a Canon 600D with 50mm and 55-250, and my simple 1855. I've not advanced it. I've not got a new kit.
Okay, great.
But to be very frank, I have stopped shooting digital, which I will come at the end of the presentation. I have started shooting on analog, and I shoot with a Yashica 635 and Yashica Pentax K1000 mostly.
Oh, that's great. That's great as well as interesting. How is the career in photography to making it as a main career? What do you suggest to the people, those who are undergrads right now or graduate? Like, what do you suggest them? Is it how the market is going to be for the jobs, or photography market total itself?
There is actually, I wouldn't say there is a photography market. You need to find your market. Like, for example, when I was the director of Symbiosis School of Photography, you know it. And while I was actually there, I found out there was this final year students always used to think that Mumbai is the place. No offense to Mumbaiites, Mumbaikars, if anybody is here. But I'm sorry, the place Mumbai is saturated. There are thousands of them right there. Why don't you look beyond Mumbai? Look at other centers. Look at options provided by non-governmental organizations, which may not pay you much, but you get to do amazing projects. You get to travel for free. You get to have food for free. You get to stay for all are taken care of. Your pay is very less, but amazing projects they offer. Look for fundings. There are like umpteen number of projects across the globe. The world is in your hand. Your phone is there. Google and find out funds. Write proposals. You need to learn to write proposals to get the right kind of projects. This hard work you need to do. Once you do this hard work, you can get any kind of project. You don't need a market to actually explore and find out where I can earn money. Money is there. People are ready to fund you. There are exciting projects, but you need to find out. You need to apply. Maybe 5 times you will fail, but the 6th time you will succeed. I have a lot of students who are doing very interesting projects in Europe, in Belgium, in countries like New Zealand, in countries like what is that place? I forgot the name. I mean, like those countries which we have never even heard, but they are doing projects there. So it's just about finding the right place and the right people and the right projects. But though they don't do it, many of the students want the shortcut. They want to go to Mumbai, do fashion photography, do some model shoots, and then that's it. And they get some 10,000, 15,000, and they get to have a conflict with their parents because they are not able to fund their own, stay in accommodation, and they kind of, get into this whole muddle of Mumbai. No, please go out, search online. There are so many projects, even in India. There are, funding agencies who give you money for, projects. But all that you have to do is give them a convincing project, a convincing proposal.
Okay. We have more questions. We will continue after the seconds. Thank you very much. Please carry on. You can present your, now you can present your.
Can you share? Yeah, you can shift to the sharing model. I hope everybody can see it now.
You can see. Thank you.
Okay. Now, the country where I live in now, which is happiness personified. We all know that many of you who would have read about Bhutan, they would know what it is all about, because this is a country which does not have GDP. They have something called as gross national happiness, GNH or GNQ, quotient they call it. So here I have used an advanced camera, which is the 5D and I've also used a Nikon D850 with a 1735 and a 135 block lens. So this is not my kit. This I had taken from the college where I was working previously. They had this, and I took it for my travel. While I came to Bhutan, I didn't know much of Bhutan, but it was in my bucket list. I have learned about it. I've seen a lot of pictures online. But again, my thirst for finding new images with stories was always there in my mind. Now, this image itself kind of gives you a power hierarchy where there is this flag, which is the flag of Bhutan, and this kind of symbolizes the place where the parliament is, or where the entire government functions from. So to move on with this particular aspect, I also know that Bhutan is a constitutional monarchy, which is basically the king is the ultimate. He decides, but then the government is an elected government, which is a democratic government with a prime minister and a panel of ministers who run the government in a very beautiful synchronized manner with the monarchy. What I found, I mean, living here for the past 3 months, and I also find that they are amazing. But then, how do you bring out these aspects? Now, many people travel to Bhutan, they come out with brilliant photographs. Why? Because the country is beautiful. You go during the summer season or spring season, it's all jacarandas everywhere. But what is it? If you just click a beautiful picture, what is the point? You need to go beyond. If you have to tell stories, it's not about beautiful pictures, right? Now, looking at the politics, again, I come back to politics, starting from Kerala to Argentina, there's politics, there's history, there's art, there's culture. I combine everything in my travel. Now, how do you combine everything in your travel? This particular location was the first location that I went, and this is the parliament, or where the government actually functions from. and every important decision to do with the country is taken. Unfortunately, they allow you inside on an everyday basis after 5 o'clock in the evening. While I was casually chatting with the driver, he also told that this particular thing is allowed only after 5 o'clock, but just 5:30. But from 5 to 5:30, there is a function which is called as the retreat ceremony, which we have in the Indian military as well, the bringing down of the flag. Now, it's not just bringing down of the flag, it has so much of symbolism and meaning to it. So this is how it starts. At 5 o'clock sharp, the military brings in a huge, I don't know what to call it, it's like a scroll, and they march in. And then these people wait, and the flag is lowered, and it signifies the end of day. End of working day. So in Bhutan, it's 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, beyond 5 o'clock, nobody works except the shops and other necessary items. Every government officer closes at 5 o'clock. They fold it and put it in that. Now, this image is the storytelling image. Now, that's a sequence. If you look at it, the marching in, then the people waiting, then they are folding, they are coming, and then this image tells you the story. The driver told me that this signifies the three main aspects of the Bhutanese, life or the country. One is their religious. Here you see the monk in his religious attire, right? The military, which signifies the monarchy, that is the king and the majesty, and then there is democracy and the common man, all in one picture. So for me, I was looking, I was observing, and I found out from my driver, who was my guide as well, who told that if you see, sir, there are three very important people in this retreat ceremony. One is the monk, who signifies the religion, which is Buddhism. So it's a Buddhist country, and it is one of the last surviving Buddhist countries in the world. The second one is the common man, who is very important, and that signifies democracy, like the people, which belongs to the people, and then the ruler, who is the majesty, which is the military, which it signifies, power. So this is exactly what I said as storytelling. If you can't give such images, then you are not actually telling stories. If you just have beautiful images, there's no point. And Bhutan is beautiful. You turn left, it's beautiful. You turn right, it's beautiful. Everywhere you see snow-capped mountains, you have nice, colorful people. Costumes, people wearing nice, colorful costumes. So that's one very important thing. And of course, this particular angle that I chose to show the main center of the assembly is to show that, the supreme power. So a low angle kind of magnifies your structure or your image, and gives you a dramatic composition. And I've also, again, I love to use a lot of foregrounds, which is like a bouquet and a very soft foreground to add value to that image. If it is just a plain building, any building in Bhutan would look like this, but there's a golden throne there on top. Then, of course, every place, every state, or every country has, every district or village will have its own unique architecture. At least in India, I've seen every state having different architecture style, which pertains to the climate, the weather, the culture, and everything. So here, this is a very important thing. They use a lot of wood in Bhutan, and most of it is done in wood. And they're very symmetrical because the religion itself is very systematic, very disciplined. So their structures are also very, very disciplined and structured. They have a lot of symmetry in their architecture. How do you bring that? Thankfully, I had a very wide angle lens, and I could get these lines and converging lines also combined with the structure in the middle. And while you're doing architecture, please make sure you do not compose it from the front. You can do it. You can break the rules. But here, try to give that dimension of depth. The z-axis, which is the depth, should be emphasized. Similarly, with this image, again, I have tried to get those shapes, basically the symmetry that I found in that structure. So this is inside the parliament. This is how it looks. And of course, these are also, again, very, very important. Bhutan is known for its wooden masks and mask dances. And these are some of the masks, but these are not masks. These are basically, structures and statues on the walls, which are basically gods. And they have different depictions of this in all over the place. So now here it is shot in artificial light, but I tried to, emphasize the shapes by using harsh shadows. So the light is falling straight from top, and then it creates harsh shadows below, which kind of gives you a nice, the definition of shape. And of course, you can't go too much inside. You are then sent out after some time. So coming back in the evening, it was like, it was kind of going to rain. So I found this image to, sum it up very beautifully, to get a nice, angle of both the sides. If you look at it, you have this and this. So that's exactly what I meant by depth. There's an x-axis, there's a y-axis, then there's this z-axis, which is also present in this picture. So the sense of depth and perception is important while you shoot architecture. If you have to bring out the shapes, and of course, professional architecture photographers, they use still shift lenses to correct all these verticals. But for me, it doesn't matter. For me, the drama is more important. And at the same time, if you look, these foreground, those elements on the right side are very important as well. And the people of Bhutan are, the next significant thing that I learned about Bhutan is they're very religious, they're very pious. Now, that comes out very easily in a place like Bhutan, because a lot of people who are religious, who sit in these, chotens, which are basically the prayer, tombs. And this is shot inside the main choten of the third king, which is in Thimphu. And, these old people come there and sit there because there is free medical checkup every Tuesday or Thursday, if I'm not wrong. The doctors come there and do checkup for the old people. And that, again, is a very interesting story. How does a country take care of their elderly, who are mostly, abandoned, or probably they're alone, or they're just there? So this is an image which actually gives you that significance, and I have used shallow depth of field and also a little bit of perspective, even though it's a shallow depth of field. And breaking the rule, as I told you in the beginning, in the objective, I have mentioned that you can always break the rule. People always say there should not be much of headroom while you're shooting portraits. But here, interestingly, I have used a lot of headroom. Why? Because I found it interesting. The background, the pattern that is forming in the background is interesting. And with a 135mm lens, which is an f2.8, I could beautifully get this, a soft pattern at the background with the person in the foreground, very candidly, looking towards his right. And of course, I've used the looking space, but I have broken the rule of the head space, which is basically above the head. And again, as I told you, it is the people and their costumes. So what they wear is so important. The women wear something called as kira, and the men wear something called as go. And this is an egalitarian society. If you look at it, the majesty himself is wearing the same clothes as a common man. The only thing that is different is the material and the shawl that he wears around it, which signifies royalty. So it is an egalitarian society where all people are equal, from the majesty to the common man, they are equal. And that is how they signify it. Now, this is another very important story behind this picture, is that the people of Bhutan have to wear their official national dress to work. So if they are working, they should wear this costume. Only they can wear casual clothes when they are off work. So in my college now, all of my Bhutanese friends wear, the women wear the kira and the men wear the go. So it's there in their culture, it's there in their tradition. They never, try to, say anything bad about it. They're so nice. And they're very comfortable as well. During winters, they have thicker goes, and in summers, they have thinner ones, slightly thinner ones. So here, the background is a wooden edifice with three people, and especially three of them are old, and they have three different, the one woman looking at her hand, the other woman, I don't know what she is doing. The third one is so busy with the phone. And there's also a contrast of technology in their life. Not contrast, there's a relevance of technology in their life and how important it is to them now is also showcased in this picture. Now, apart from the people, the third most important thing, from power structure, which is democracy and constitution, to the people, and now it's the religion. And thankfully, the person who is also attending this seminar, Mr. Jatin, told me that while you go to Bhutan, you should walk to this point, which is called as Buddha Point, from below and not just go straight. And thanks to you, Jatin, and his advice, I did that. And this is a view where the face of the Buddha slowly starts appearing while you walk up. And that's a beautiful emotional moment for me, because the omnipresence of God and how while you go closer, he becomes bigger and bigger to you, and he plays a very important role to you. I'm not a religious person, but looking at it philosophically and spiritually, the importance of God while you go closer becomes bigger and he becomes more significant in your life is very, very important. So that's the exact feeling that I had while I was walking up. Now, if I would have just shot the image of the Buddha's face and it would have been plain, it would have been a good picture. But the element of contrast is how small human beings are in front of the Almighty. Now, that's what is the right side of the image talks about, how these people standing there are nothing compared to the size of the Almighty right here. So that's how pictures tell stories again. Then again, the last thing was the time period I went to this country. It was springtime. And then while you look at the country, it's I would say painted lavender. But now living in Bhutan, I would say during springtime, it's every color. It's a sprinkle of all colors. And I used to trek recently, 3-4 treks have gone. It's full of rhododendrons. There are 44 varieties of rhododendrons. Now, while you are shooting, it's very important that you give a relevance and reference to the time period that you were there, the climate, the weather. So here it's jacarandas, and this was shot in the Punakha Palace. And then this solitude of this man standing there with his costume. So there's a contrast of red and the lavender, or lavender or violet, whatever you might call it, that's a cool color and this is a warm color. And so in travel photography, you can do, the technique of contrast can be applied in various ways. One of the ways is to use color to contrast and make your subject stand out. Here, in the foreground, the jacarandas are slightly in focus. The background, it creates a beautiful bouquet or a soft, pattern. But the main subject, the monk, is standing out, because of the contrast in color. And to give more relevance to the contrast and the beauty of the springtime in Bhutan, it's the close-up of the jacarandas superimposed with the mighty walls of the palace of Punakha. And yes, now this is pretty shocking for most of you. I hope all of you are 18 plus and understand what this is. For me, this was very interesting. As I told you from beginning, how do you get unique stories? I always am curious, so I look for new things. From the day I have landed in Paro to my trip to Thimphu, I was observing very unique, symbols like this, which is the phallus or the penis, an ejaculating penis, especially mostly in most of the houses, and also sometimes in shops and sometimes in office spaces. And I was a little shy to ask my guide, who was my driver, what is this? But then finally I gathered my strength to ask what it is. So now this is culture. And then for us, it's shocking. As Indians, we would probably close our eyes while you see such an image and just walk off, and we wouldn't ask. The same feeling came to me, but being a travel photographer, I was inquisitive. So I asked this question to him, and he said, "So you don't know this is a very important thing in our culture. It is a symbol of fertility, and we worship the phallus." Now there's a parallel that I can draw in India. We also worship the phallus in some way or the other. But I don't want to get into those data. But I wanted to know how this became a culture, an acceptable culture, a country which has not opened up to the world, which was almost completely closed till the 1960s and 70s, has such a very bold culture where the phallus is displayed in almost every house. And then my driver said, "This it's about a divine madman and his crazy wisdom." Now, I said, do you have anything to do with him in the places that I'm visiting? He said, it's in Punaka. There's this temple where people go there to pray for children, to have children and all of that. So I said, take me there. He said, but your itinerary does not have it. Why? Because the typical tourist itinerary does not involve this, because many people don't want to go to this place. But me, being a travel photographer, said, can you please change my itinerary? Then he said, sir, you have to give an alternative that can be adjusted. The best alternative that I adjusted this is I had like river rafting. I said, you know what, I can do it in my place. I don't need river rafting in Bhutan. Let me go to this palace. That's how you need to explore. This is a part of the exploratory habit that you should have as a travel photographer. This is a wider view, and the divine madman is called Drukpa Kunle, who belonged to a royal family, but then he started a monk kind of life, but he had several women in his life, and he believed that inside he is pure. Inside is pure for himself, and outside it doesn't matter to him that all of this is and he believes that freedom from all these restrictions is what makes a man more intelligent, more divine. So looking at this, this is how the houses near that temple where I go, and predominantly in many places in Thimphu and Paro, you see this as well, but not so big. But then yes, you see. But in that place in Punaka, these are the symbols that are painted on the walls, and people are so casual. So how do you show that we all know this is a house, but how are people taking it? Of course, he's having his hand on his head, but he's casually sitting there. So these are very normal things that you see in Bhutan. Now, going into the story, there is a 1.5 hour trek to this particular temple. So walking a long way, you see these phallus painting shops and handicraft shops. So as a tourist, typically you tend to, like if you are shy, you wouldn't take these pictures, but I always wanted to. But now for me, these decorative items are showpieces, but how are they made? Now that is when I walked into one of those, handicraft store. I bent behind and was a little curious to know whether they do it there. Somebody told, yes, they actually do the painting there. And I found this girl sitting there and doing this painting. So this is how they do it. Now, again, it's about exploring and giving the bigger story. So I always use 2 images if I have to tell stories. Sometimes I use this, but here it is. The close-up kind of emphasizes on what exactly it is, and then the wide shot talks about who is actually painting it. So the context comes in the wider shot. The close-up gives you more details. So this is, again, you have to learn in terms of aesthetics how you can bring out. Then the third image is stacked up, phalluses, or probably these are all going to become, keychains. Now, that's how the sequence is. Look at it: a close-up, and then a mid shot, and then again a close-up, and then again a close-up. But then all of them have different perspectives. I've used shallow depth of field in all of the images in very, very different ways. But then I wanted to mainly focus on what that particular object is, or that handicraft work is. They believe that this man had a penis which is called as a thunderbolt of flaming wisdom. So that's exactly why they paint the phallus. And that is why you have the ejaculating penis as the symbol. And that's how the culture is defined. But you might be wondering, what is this? This is all like wow, I mean, like, it's painted, there are so many, images there, but then that's how it is. So that's the belief that they have. And then while you walk, so it's like a journey. So you see all of these shops which sell it, and then you see this particular board which talks about this divine madman, and then the entire landscape where this particular temple is situated. Now, sometimes I go the reverse way, from close up to wider shots, rather than starting with a wide shot and then going in detail. You can always tell stories either way. And then, as you all know, in Bhutan, you can't shoot inside the temples. So I had to take and compromise on shooting outside the temples. And while on my way back, I was wondering, where, I mean, if you look at the far end, this is where the main road is, and this is the whole trek. There's actually little more further, but it takes a longer time to walk up right here, and there's more to go from here. But if you look at it, this is the image that is there, and it's very, very prominent in collaboration with the prayer flags, which kind of gives you which country it is. It is a Buddhist dominated country, and these prayer flags are found only in places where there is Buddhism, connected with the divine madman and his concert, and the road which leads to this place. So it's all contextualized in one simple picture. Now, that ends my story of Bhutan and my new journey and my latest fancy or love, or true love I would call it, is how I started photography, which is analog photography. And now, thankfully, I have a WhatsApp group of a lot of people who basically shoot analog. I got my favorite camera, which I always wanted to buy when I was young, which is the Pentax K1000. And the lens again, which is a 50mm f1.4, which is a beautiful lens. I started exploring, stories through analog photography. Thankfully, we have Ilford, which has come out with new film rolls, and their production has started. There are a lot of dealers who actually sell it in India. And this is a story of a small village called Ranipur, where this community of tribals called the Pardis in Madhya Pradesh live. And it's near Panna National Park. And a few portrait pictures of that particular community and their lifestyle I would like to showcase. The children and the walls give you a beautiful texture. Again, here you don't have too much of depth. I love shooting flat images like this, contrasting with human element. I also started shooting with expired films because they are cheaper, and in that WhatsApp group they usually sell it. I got this Fortepan 100, which was expired in 2003, and shot these structures of Khajuraho in medium format. Now this is 35mm camera, shot in 35mm, and this and you can see that there's absolutely no cropping involved in any of these images. It's just composed the way it is composed. And I have used the foreground and the background and the subject and the background, and you can see the depth. One, the eye, this points to the subject and then takes you to the background. So this is all done in a medium format camera, which is Yashica 635. I shot on 100 ISO film for Tepan. This is another shot of the Khajuraho buildings, and this is a totally different way of telling my story. This is the medium that I'm using. One, I'm using a very, very old format, which is the camera is 65 years old, so you can imagine the medium format is still there, but medium format camera that I'm using is 65 years old, which is still in good condition, and the film is again an expired film roll. So that's the story in this picture: old monuments with an expired film with an old vintage camera. So the medium becomes the story. It's not the subject; it's the medium, it's the camera, it's the method that I have used. Again, a medium format shot of Khajuraho with the same camera, same photo of that series. And I also did a series in Goa, landscapes with medium format. So medium format is a very unusual format for modern day camera, photographers, because we have the 3:2 ratio. But here it's almost like a square, or sometimes you tend to shoot in 16:9, which is wrong, but then people do that. But here you almost have a square shape, and shooting landscapes in that gives you a very different perspective. So I tried a few landscapes like this and like this, which was shot in Goa, and I kind of designed it and put it on Facebook, and one of my very good friends from Argentina asked me to send the original images and asked me permission if she can put it up on the wall, and she actually printed it in big size and has put it up on the wall there. And the last story that I would like to tell is, whatever travel photography you do, whatever money you make out of travel photography or blogging or trying to tell stories, at the end of the day, also try to be more responsible. Here is a series which is also kind of a story of the Pardi children who I am working with now. They are they're very vibrant. They have a very characteristic face. And this is from the school in Madhya Pradesh, in Panna, near Ranipur village. And I did this series as a portrait series. Now, the series and the character of the particular tribe or the community that I've shot becomes the story in this particular, whole thing. So the characters are very different. I chose, I shot all of the kids who were there at that time, but I've taken and edited, not edited, I've chosen a few who are very unique. And you look at the series, and this is again processed by, I did the processing, so there are a lot of dust. And I like the dust because it gives you a very artistic definition of the image. And I would like to end my presentation with this boy who has a beautiful highlight. I don't know where the highlight came from. I didn't use a flash. It was natural light shot. But this 635, while you shoot portraits, Yashica 635, gives you nice, interesting bouquets like you see in this image at the back. And I would like to say a big thank you to Chiiz and all of you who are part of it. Stay safe and stay calm. And we all have to hope and pray that the situation now becomes much better. Thank you so much. And I would like to take questions after this.
Thank you, Nithil. Amazing presentation. Not only that, amazing skills of storytelling. That's also very important. And
Thank you.
we do have questions. So that came from Hema Narayan. She is also one of our mentors, Bangalore-based, amazing travel architecture photographer, very senior photographer. She has written. I like the story. I like the way you narrated the stories. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Hemant.
I read the question later, actually. I did not see it earlier. One of the questions we have from Ankan Sen, that how to choose the project. Like you have done projects in Himachal, you have done it near Panna, Goa, and several places. Like what is your workflow or your thought process because it would not be happening overnight that you decide to go ahead and do it. Like what all the thought process goes behind it, what all the work, research?
Basically reading. I read a lot. So when I read, I find one link and then I go to the next link, from that link to that link. So you keep going. So at the end, at a point, you somehow feel that this is a story that should be told. And then I choose. But with regards to Panna, that is my PhD. I'm doing my doctorate thesis on the tribes of Pardi tribes. And if you look at why I chose to shoot that portrait, is basically to get more attention towards their problems. Pardis are primarily, nomadic tribes, but they are the only tribe in India who are born criminals, or probably a group of tribes who are born criminals. Now, why born criminals? is because of a draconian act of 1872 by the British, which classifies them as criminals. So if an act says so and so is a criminal, then he's born a criminal. And today they still carry the tag of being a criminal. But there are a lot of organizations which are helping them to bring helping them in trying alternate livelihoods, and also the entire tag of being a criminal should go away. So to bring out that aspect of it, I took that series and I'm trying to make it into a small booklet. So if people can buy that, and then that money can go into their education, the money can go into empowering them, not bringing them out of what they actually do. I'm trying to, if I can, train a few of them in wildlife photography, for example. And if any wildlife photographer would like to take any of these people, they're excellent trackers. Long back, they were used as trackers by the Britishers, by the Rajas, by the poachers. Today, I think wildlife photographers can use their skills to track animals to shoot, to identify birds. So that's the kind of work that I'm doing. That's why I chose that particular topic.
Great initiatives. In fact, we have our Panna tour happening. I'll connect with you and we'll take the details and see if that works out. We would love to be part of such kind of initiatives. Thank you very much.
By the way, the Panna, I can connect you with somebody who is also here who has the connect. They have this model village, Ranipur, where these tribes usually take the tourist into the jungle, and it's a jungle trail, and they explain how they identify pug marks and everything to the tourists. So it's a very interesting story of empowerment.
We would love to do such kind of a tours rather than something which is very cliche everyone is doing. So we would definitely connect with you, and maybe we'll come up with a different tour with taking them as a guide and doing that tour. I'll definitely connect with you.
Which helps them in their livelihood, basically.
Sure. Thank you. We have a message from Khalid Pawar, and who influenced you? Like whose work you like, especially Indian photographer?
When I was young, I used to like Raghu Rai and all these famous photographers who you study while you're in school. But I don't know, somewhere down the line, I stopped looking at the works of other people. It doesn't mean I stopped completely. I do look at it. I do understand. I do learn a lot. But inspiring, I would say it's Henry Carter-Bresson, whose work is brilliant in terms of storytelling, and of course Raghu is there, but Raghu. I like one book of Raghu, which is on Mother Teresa. The way he had done the storytelling in that particular book, which he published, was brilliant than the other books. But in travel photography, I don't have somebody who I really follow or or travel or storytelling or social documentary kind of genre. But in fashion, I love Rafiq Said. He's brilliant with his work. He's very unique. And architecture, Amog is right here in this panel. I love his work. You should see his book that he had published of all the High Courts and Supreme Courts of India, his High Court and the Supreme Court of India. Brilliant architecture photography that he had done. So I have a few, but I think after a point, you evolve yourself and you try to evolve your own style rather than following anybody. But yes, as I grew, I had a lot of people who I have followed.
And whom you were referring as an architecture, your known person, that person is in right now here? Okay.
Yes, he is Amok Thakur.
Okay.
He's a good friend of mine, and he had published a book which is very difficult. It took him 2 years to get permission to shoot, and I think 2 years to shoot it. And then it was actually published later, a year ago, if I'm not wrong. And it's a brilliant book. I mean, the way he had done and it's very difficult to get permissions of all the high courts. He has shot, I think, Barring one high court, he had shot all the high courts of all the states and the Supreme Court as well.
Okay, great. Amol, you are unmuted right now. If you would like to give, just say hi, maybe. Maybe if you are in that situation right now. But anyway, our time is also getting over. And any closing remarks from you? We have a lot of questions. So for everyone's information, we are going to share the recording of this session. We are going to get you a certificate of participation. Please apply it online when you submit a proof of like attending this webinar. And please do donate to Prime Minister's initiative, like Prime Minister Fund. That's really, we request all of you. Such event is done without any charge from our mentors. They've been a great help. Nithil, we really appreciate on behalf of my team. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
And,
Thank you so much.
And you're sitting in Bhutan. That's really good. I'm sure we will talk about it offline. Anything
sure.
Any closing remarks from your end? Anything you want to say?
I just want to just thank everybody who has been patiently listening to this long lecture, but all the best and stay safe.
Thank you very much, guys. We are stopping now. Thanks a lot. Stay safe. And you can log